we have to remember here that record labels really provide an artist with tons of resources, not only from a monetary perspective, from a branding, marketing, and promotions perspective as well. So by virtue of providing so much, these labels really take back so much control. And as Prince mentioned, they really, as an artist, you don't really have much control over your likeness, your branding, your marketing, and even the content that you put out. So as an artist, you're a creative person. So if you're restricted in terms of your creativity, you might get wrong. Well, the kid's doing nothing wrong, Rev. I think you hit the point nail on the head. He's doing nothing illegal, but he's taking money away from the airlines. We all know that the airlines use this really complex pricing structure. So what his website does, it circumvents that whole pricing structure. And so at the end of the day, it's affecting the airlines monetarily. So all the time in the courtroom, we see that these big companies file lawsuits as more of intimidation. So I don't think there's any legal claiming invasion of privacy against TMZ and V. Stiviano. He's claiming that those statements he made were made in a private setting, and he did not intend those to get recorded or released. With that being said, invasion of privacy from a legal perspective requires a couple elements. First, you have to have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and that reasonable expectation has to be violated. Here, Donald Sterling not only made these statements publicly, actually, to not only V. Stiviano, but to other parties, but V. Stiviano's come out and said that he agreed to have those statements recorded. So that would basically negate any type of reasonable expectation of privacy. In addition to reasonable expectation of privacy in terms of providing proof for that, you also have to establish damages. And here, we have to remember that Donald Sterling sold the LA Clippers for $2 billion. So in terms of monetary damages, he'd be hard-pressed to perspective. It's a big deal for them to divorce. And what's really interesting here is that there was no prenuptial agreement in place. And we have to remember California is a community property state. So the law presumes that the assets accumulated during the course of the marriage will be divided 50-50 based upon community property.
Injury matter at all?
Well, it's going to be huge. First of all, spousal support is intended to allow both people to maintain the same lifestyle they had during the course of the marriage, post-marriage. And here you have Megan Fox, where she made tons more money than the gentleman here, Brian Austin Green. So he was going to get spousal support no matter what. But the Vertigo claim adds another.
But exactly how do you reach that threshold?
Right. It's very difficult. It's not black and white. It's very, very gray. And during this trial, they had numerous experts that came up, numerous music experts that came up and said they really dug deep into the elements of each song and said, hey, they looked at the chords, they looked at the harmonic structure, they looked at the melodies and said, hey, obviously on Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams' side, the experts said these are very different songs, but obviously in Marvin Gaye's camp, the experts said these are very similar.
Including him now.
Well, they're not only including T.I., they're including Universal Music, they're including Interscope Records, including Star Trek Entertainment, amongst others.
Is it just more money?
More money. First of all, more money, but they also want to persuade the court. There's so many unknowns. We have to understand that California statute of limitations laws with respect to sex offenses is very complex because there are specific sex offenses, and every specific sex offense has its own statute of limitations. It's unlike other jurisdictions that have these broad categories of sex offenses and then statute of limitations that apply to those broad categories. And we also have to remember that California also has exceptions to statute of limitations and tolling periods that allow the DA to bring claims after the periods have passed. Get frustrated. And then also from a monetary perspective, kind of going to that slavery analogy that Prince set forth, record labels get all of their money first before the artist gets paid, and they're able to recoup all of their expenses too. So oftentimes you see artists that you think might be uber successful, at the end of the day, they don't make much money. And I think TLC back in the 90s was a prime example. They were probably one of the hottest groups, not only in the country, but in the world. But at the end of the day, they weren't really making any money because via the contractual terms that were in place, the record labels was able to really make all the money initially and then also recoup most of their expenses before